Oh, I did. So good evening, everybody. Thank y'all for joining us this evening. Amanda, our president, is in her car, so she will be in and out, and ask that we get the meeting started. So we're going to jump right into our presentation. And Greg Story is going to provide us a very interesting presentation tonight. So let me read you his bio and a little bit about what he's going to speak about. So Greg is currently retired from the National Weather Service, where he had a 30-year career. His last position in the Federal Service was as a hydrometeorologist for the National Weather Service West Gulf River Forecast Center here in Fort Worth. He is our past president of the North Texas chapter of the American Meteorological Society and National Weather Association, and currently is the North Texas Regional Coordinator for the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow, also known as CoCoRaHS Network. In retirement, Greg serves on the operations team of the Minuteman Disaster Response Organization as a meteorological support person and is also the Tarrant County member coordinator. After witnessing firsthand the devastation caused by the EF5 tornado that struck Joplin, Missouri in May 2011, the hearts of a few men were ignited to celebrate a volunteer, create a volunteer group capable of responding to and serving the communities most affected. Minuteman Disaster Response is a first responder support team comprised of well-trained volunteers. Before disaster strikes, we forecast storms and prepare our teams for deployment. When the call comes to serve, MDR's goal is to provide significant aid to disaster victims and emergency personnel utilizing the NIMS ICS management system. Our volunteers are trained in all areas of disaster relief, including debris cleanup, resource management, search and rescue, first aid, emergency communications, and command instructions. We are there before, during, and after disaster strikes to serve communities who need our help the most. This presentation will discuss the two teams involved, the rapid response team and the relief team. Anyone may join and participate and is open to both men and women. What Greg failed to put in here, he's also an avid Texas Ranger fan, and you get him going about the Rangers, good luck getting him stopped. So Greg has been a good friend of the chapter for many, many years, and we appreciate you providing this presentation to us tonight, Greg. So it's all yours.
Well, thanks, Greg. I don't think we're going to have much to talk about when it comes to the Texas Rangers this year, unfortunately. But anyway, it's great to be a part of the meeting tonight. And it's kind of neat being the first presenter, I suppose, with Amanda being the president of the organization, considering she kind of took over my position when I retired from the National Weather Service. Greg, is this what I need to go full screen on this? Is it that button right there? Yeah, there we go. I guess it is. All right. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Looks great.
Good. All right. Obviously, when someone's about ready to retire from a job, everybody asks them, well, what are you going to do in retirement? And they sort of like say, if you don't have something in mind to take over some of your time when you're in retirement, then you're just going to kind of wither away. So anyway, I knew of an organization even before I retired, the one called Minuteman Disaster Response, and actually started getting a little bit involved with this group before retirement. And boy, it's hard to believe it's been almost a year since I retired, but it was March 28th last year. The picture you're seeing on your screen was a picture that my boss took of me on my very last day. Or maybe it was Amanda even that took this picture, because I think she was working with me that day.
Yep,
anyway,
that was me.
Yeah. So that was a year ago. But I just wasn't exactly sure until retirement came along how much Minuteman would use my services and see where it goes from there. As it turns out, I was able to join the Minuteman's operations team and give a lot of meteorological support. And we had no idea back in March and April of last year what kind of season it would be for Minuteman and for meteorology in general, between a fairly active severe storm season and very extremely active hurricane season, it turned out to be a very substantial year. Just recently, not only have I been serving as a meteorologist for the operations team, but I also was asked to be the Tarrant County coordinator. And as the presentation goes on, I'll speak a little bit more about what that entails. But anyway, I also wanted to let you know that you've got a new person that's on our Zoom call tonight, and that is Linda Wise. Linda is also on our operations team and helps me out a great deal, combing Twitter, Facebook, everything else while I'm watching the weather maps and the radar, and we work together to help inform Minuteman exactly what's going on in real time weather-wise. So I invited her to be on the call tonight and be a part of our chapter meeting here. So I hope you all will welcome Linda as we go along as well. I want you to watch this video.
We have disaster response teams out here. I want to introduce you to Minuteman.
Every minute counts, and that's where Minuteman Response comes in.
It's called Minuteman.
The Texas-based Minuteman Disaster Response team is on site.
The destruction that takes place during these things, it just destroys things. It doesn't destroy the relationships of the people. Things are not of value. Having your life and having your loved ones around are of value.
This group of Christian men got together and started something called the Minutemen. An amazing idea. They're exactly the kind of people that you need to hear the story, because there should be Minutemen all around the country.
That gives you a little bit of an idea, a brief introduction of the Minuteman Disaster Response Group. What we're going to cover in our presentation here this evening at our AMS-NWA meeting is a quick overview of where Minuteman Disaster Response came from, who they are, how they are requested out for a deployment, how they are funded, and where they are going in the future. And lastly, and perhaps the longest part of this presentation will be the Hurricane Laura deployment, which I went down to Lake Charles on 2 different weekends to help out. First of all, where did Minuteman come from? Back, as you know, back on May 22nd, 2011, Joplin, Missouri was hit by a very devastating EF5 tornado. A tornado that was about a mile wide, had wind speeds of greater than 200 miles an hour, 158 deaths, over 1,100 injuries, and $2.8 billion in damages. At that point, it was the 7th deadliest tornado in history. And there was a group of men who got together and said, we have got to go up there and help out. So they did the thing that most people would do. There were 4 men. They got a truck full of stuff, everything from pillows to blankets to clothes to some food items, and loaded up this truck and headed to Joplin, Missouri. The gentleman that you can see right there in the center is a gentleman who kind of became the brainchild of Minuteman Disaster Response, a gentleman named Mr. Paul Pogue. Anyway, they headed up to Joplin, and what they really found out is that they were more of a burden on Joplin than they were a help. First thing they learned is that the people were so devastated up there, they didn't really need any of the stuff that they brought along with them and loaded up in that trailer. They just saw warehouse after warehouse full of teddy bears, blankets, items like that, with no one really to pass them out, and people that have lost everything, that was not what they really needed at that time. They needed help cleaning up. Also, these 4 men found out that they needed a place to stay. They needed to be fed. They needed to use somebody's equipment to help out to do the things that these people really needed help with doing. And so they were so discouraged when they left that Paul Pogue and these 4 men sat down and really literally got in a coffee shop and got out some napkins and started mapping out what later would become the Minuteman Disaster Response Organization. The first thing they said is that we have got to be totally self-sufficient. Whatever that means, we've got to be totally self-sufficient to go there and not be a burden on anybody, but just be able to help in whatever way it was that was necessary. And they also saw that it was going to be really important that they work under the incident command structure that FEMA has set up. And so that would mean that there would be one guy that's in charge, and they would work underneath the person or people that were in charge in the incident command structure of things and go that route so that they're working in concert with other people from other disaster relief groups. So that's how it started. They started getting their training with a group of people from the CERT class of McKinney back in 2012. This gentleman that is back here in the blue shirt is Matt Payne, and he is now the executive director of the Minuteman Disaster Response Group. So all kind of started up in McKinney with these group of men and getting the training that they initially needed in order to get started in forming Minuteman Disaster Response Group. So this is who they are now. They are a regional task force. They are a 501c3 charitable nonprofit organization. We are now at roughly 150 trained and vetted volunteers based throughout Texas and Oklahoma. There are 2 distinct teams, the response team and the relief team. They now have over $1 million in assets and equipment ready to deploy at a moment's notice. They are completely self-sufficient when they are deployed. They work alongside the local jurisdiction to assist with accomplishing their objectives, and they are headquartered out of McKinney, Texas. The current area of response for Minuteman is roughly a 400-mile radius of McKinney. So that's most of Texas, most of Oklahoma, most of Arkansas, and most of Louisiana. They are also trying to branch out somewhat out to New Mexico. Haven't really done any deployments out there as yet, though. As of this current moment, they are really trying to bolster a lot of new membership up around Tulsa, Oklahoma, to really branch out into that eastern Oklahoma, western and northern Arkansas area that might be a little bit more than 400 miles from McKinney. Well, there are, as I mentioned, are 2 types of teams at the Minuteman Disaster Response Group. The first is the Rapid Response Team. The Rapid Response Team is not the team that you initially join if you were to become a member of Minuteman. The Rapid Response Team requires additional training over and above what a person just coming into the organization and joining the relief team would have. First of all, they are required to take the FEMA ICS courses 700, 100, and 200. They are required to take a course in first aid, CPR, and AED. The next thing is that they are to be rated with National Search and Rescue Tech 3, Level 3, and also they have to pass the TEX Wide Area Search class, and that's out of the Texas A&M Extension Service. Additional operational certificates would be going to SAR-Tech Level 2 for search and rescue. If they want to be a drone pilot, they have to pass the FAA Part 107 pilot training. We have a flood and swiftwater technician and a flood and swiftwater boat operator course. And also they can branch up to ICS FEMA courses 300 and 400. Another thing that they may add to this list, too, is that they may require rapid response team members to have an amateur radio license. A lot of them do already, but not everyone does, and not everybody's required at this point. The rapid response team is actually relatively small in number compared to the number of people that are on the relief team. They have ongoing training exercises. They do them monthly, quarterly, and annually. The rapid response team's first and foremost mission is on days when it looks like there's going to be some severe weather, particularly something that's going to cause wind damage, such as extremely high winds, a derecho, or tornadoes. This team is put on watch to be saying that we think severe weather is going to break out at a certain time at a certain location. Rapid Response Team 1, you be ready to head on out so that you're at that location by 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. The team will deploy in a rapid response unit out of McKinney, Texas, and hopefully be at the target. Now, what the operations team does, and I'll talk more about this a little bit in a second, is that we will say to the people in the rapid response unit that this is where a watch has been issued, this is where warnings currently are in effect, this is where we're getting reports of damage if the severe weather is broken out. As you'll see, in the unit itself, they have got live radar. It looks inside like it is a tornado chase vehicle, but in fact, they're not really, by definition, tornado chasers. So they go out to a severe weather target. A second team will go out from McKinney, and if it's going to be a widespread outbreak, they'll go to a different target, so that hopefully between the two of them, they'll get in on areas that are getting hit by severe weather. Now, what I mean by that they're not tornado chasers is that they want to be where there's going to be tornadoes, but they want to be far enough away so that they're not experiencing any of the damage as it's occurring, so that they're in a safe place. But then they can be right going into the community after the tornadoes hit, so they can start doing whatever they're assigned to do, whether it's search or rescue, start cleaning up roads from down trees and power lines to maybe get the throughways and the highways open, or help with the injured, whatever that may happen to be. They want to be the first people in there, if at all possible, assuming that they're asked to come in. They will do whatever they're asked to do. And foremost, they also can provide emergency communication, either through amateur radio or through the internet. The picture that you're seeing was taken last year from a tornado that was moving into Medill, Oklahoma. They were one of the first ones to move in there after that particular tornado moved through Medill. And others can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had a fatality in that town from this tornado, if I'm not mistaken. But it was not a huge tornado, but it did do a mess. And so they were there as the tornado was touching down, and I was working on the operations team from home. Now, the nice thing about the operations team is that we are now able to go virtual, so that I can sit right here in the man cave of my house, and I can participate fully in everything and telling where these rapid response units, where they should go, where the storms are firing up, and so forth. Our second team, and certainly the largest team, is our relief team. This is the level of membership that when a person wants to come into the Minuteman Disaster Response organization, that they would come into. Most people stay on the relief team, and that's perfectly fine because they do the lion's share of the work after the initial storm has moved through. Their required training really isn't that much. There's online basic training that lasts, I think, maybe 3 hours. It's on the command structure from FEMA. It's on safety. It's on communication, and also on the psychological effects of disasters. Other optional certifications that certainly come in to help down the road is that if you like using a chainsaw, if you can get certified to become a sawyer, that's a lot of the work that we do. Also, if you know how to run heavy equipment, you can get certified to become a heavy equipment operator. We use both extensively down after cleaning up Hurricane Laura down on Lake Charles. And, of course, there are ongoing exercises and trainings quarterly and annually for the relief team as well. But generally what happens is that if there is a widespread disaster and our rapid response unit has already seen what has happened and what's going on, then if the local emergency management coordinators or Department of Public Safety want us to spend extensive time helping with search and rescue or cleanup, then the relief team is notified, and then they will deploy a couple of days later and stay as long as necessary. And when the relief team is deployed, that's when we set up our base camp at a set location, and then we send our teams out to help clean up and do whatever from our base camp. And I'll show you pictures of that here pretty soon. Here's a look at some of the equipment that we have right now. We currently have a Rapid Response Unit 1. We have a second Rapid Response Unit 2. We have a 46-foot response trailer. We have two swift water rescue boats. We have a 53-foot mobile sleeping unit so that when we set up base camp, there's a place for us to sleep. We have a 40-foot incident command post that includes television monitors, satellite TV, amateur radio, and internet, and it even has Wi-Fi as part of it. Then we have a 32-foot shower and restroom unit. This probably is the most popular trailer when we deploy that we put out there, because this is available to people in the community who have no running water, have no air conditioning, have no way of taking showers or going even to the restroom. We have a 42-foot relief trailer that holds all of our equipment, such as chainsaws and so forth. We have a trailer that we can haul heavy equipment. We have some drones. We have many chainsaws. We have UTVs. We have, as I mentioned, amateur radio equipment and satellite phones. It's really an impressive organization how they've grown in 10 years. This is just a partial list. It may be pretty complete now, but a list of all the different responses that we have gone to. If you include the Joplin, Missouri tornado back in May of 2011 and helping out with the wildfires in Bastrop down in September 2011, all the way to the latest one, which is Lake Charles and Moss Bluff in August and September of this year. Even this past weekend, Minuteman was helping different residents muck their houses where they had no insurance and they had severe water damage from water pipes breaking during a cold outbreak that they had. So we help out in things even that small. Another thing that Minuteman is doing right now is they're bringing along volunteers to help out with the COVID-19 vaccine up in McKinney. Since I don't live up there, I haven't participated in that, but there are several of our volunteers that are helping to get people organized it through the lines and so forth and get vaccinated for COVID-19 in McKinney. Some of the notable agreements that we have and things that we have been able to accomplish, we are in complete agreement with Tarrant County in terms of emergency and disaster planning. We do a lot of exercises with Tarrant County to test our readiness, and we do emergency and disaster operations, as I mentioned, out of Tarrant County. We have an MOU with the Texas Department of Public Safety, and we also operate under an FCC license. So those are all things. We also have a new MOU with Louisiana. It's not on the slide. It happened during Hurricane Laura. Now, how are we requested? Well, for one thing, we have to be invited. We have to be a part of the chain of command. Most of the time, people get to know us, and the emergency managers or the local law enforcement will send an email to our information email address there for minutemanresponse.org, or they'll call us up on our 214 number, or we are available by 24/7 dispatch. Daily data gathering occurs and decision making happens through our operations team. This is a picture in the upper right-hand corner of our operations center that is located up in McKinney. But because of COVID-19, it got very little use last year. We all did it virtually through Microsoft Teams. And so we were able to do just about everything, such as monitor radar, monitor social media, NWS chat, everything from our own homes. And we're able to communicate with one another and everybody else, including the rapid response units out in the field. We're able to see what messages we were sharing back and forth with each other. But of course, it all starts with this Storm Prediction Center's convective outlook, taking a look at that, getting a handle on where SPC thinks the best target area will be for severe weather on any given day. I'll get up in the morning and I'll look at the latest model data here at the house, try to get a feel for where I think the storms are going to be the worst, especially within the 200 miles of McKinney. I mentioned that the relief team will go up to 400 miles out to actually do a long deployment, but in terms of our rapid response units, we usually limit it to 200 miles so that we can come back to McKinney after a quote-unquote chase or whatever we want to call it. So anyway, we pretty much have an idea of what we're going to do by mid-morning, sort of like what a storm chaser would do, only our rapid response units are formulated, who's available, who's not, who wants to ride in the rapid response units and who doesn't. But anyway, before the disaster strikes, they forecast storms, they prepare the teams for deployment, the rapid response units. And then when they're in the field tracking storms, you can see one of our vehicles on the right. They have the anemometer on the roof as well as amateur radio antennas. And then you can see that we have got laptops and iPads and so forth inside the vehicle, so we actually can see the live radar using GR Level 2 data. So it is really a nice setup. When I first saw this vehicle, and I wasn't a member of Minuteman, it really floored me as to how much and how decked out these trucks are for seeing exactly what's going on. Not to mention being able to use your cell phones and so forth to see what the operations team is saying on Microsoft Teams, to know where storms may develop next and so forth. Well, here's a real-life example. Back in October of 2019, you may recall that all of us were sitting at home with severe storms or potentially severe storms rolling through Tarrant County. And I was halfway keeping an eye on the weather and half an eye on Channel 5 showing the Dallas Cowboys football game. They were on Sunday Night Football, and I read a message on SPC that said that we really think the potential for tornadoes is increasing over Dallas County, and that piqued my interest, so I really watched the radar more closely, and the next thing you know, we've got this monster supercell tracking through North Dallas. And I immediately got in touch with one of my other fellow Minuteman members that lives over in North Richland Hills and said to him, I said, look, this looks like it's a bad storm. I think Minuteman needs to spring into action. Within a half an hour, his bags were packed, and he was heading up to McKinney. And within an hour and a half after I told him that, he was being deployed down to North Dallas in the rapid response unit. So we were tracking the storms through Dallas. It was immediately on the ground. They worked through the first night just clearing roads for emergency crews there in North Dallas. And then after we were invited to set up a base camp there, the base camp was set up at the Gateway Church in the Dallas campus, which was just to the north of where the damage was done. And for 7 days, we sent out Sawyer teams clearing roads for power companies to restore power, and we assisted homeowners with cleanup. That was one of our shorter deployments. We thought it might go longer than that, but it didn't. But nevertheless, we were there just a couple hours after the tornado moved through and worked through the night clearing off the roadways. How are we funded? I mentioned that we are a nonprofit organization. And every year what we do is we have the Lamplight or Gala. It's a major fundraising banquet. For the second year in a row, though, that banquet has been canceled. But nevertheless, our major funders, which you see on the list here, continue to say that gala or no gala, we will continue to give support over to the Minuteman organization. Now, in order to be a part of Minuteman, they do have dues. They're not real expensive, but that's not the main source of their income. I'll tell you later on that there were people down in Lake Charles who immediately wanted to give money to Minuteman Disaster Response Group. We'll talk more about that later. But we do have several very large donors. Some are families, some are businesses, and they do a great job of supporting us. Even some churches in the area give money to Minuteman to help us with our budgetary needs throughout the year. So where are they going? Right now in the purple area, this is what we consider to be our main branch out areas. In the future, it is their desire to reach all the way up into Kentucky and Tennessee and all the way over to the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. So they have a master plan for years down the road to continue to expand the size and scope of the Minuteman Disaster Response Organization. Now I'm going to spend the rest of the time giving you a real-life example of what we did for Hurricane Laura. Of course, Hurricane Laura, it was a no-brainer. It was going to be a major hurricane making landfall somewhere on the Gulf Coast, whether it was the upper Texas coast or somewhere in Louisiana. Immediately, the rapid response units got themselves ready. One primary rapid response unit on August 26th, as the eye of the storm was approaching the southwest Louisiana Gulf Coast, drove from McKinney down to Houston. And they spent the night in a hotel on the east side of Houston where they could, in the first thing in the morning, at the first light of day, they could jump back on Interstate 10 and head over into Lake Charles. I was the one that was briefing them as they went down Interstate 45 and got to Houston as exactly what the latest information was on the storm. So they got down to Houston, and in first light the next day, they were one of the first responders into Lake Charles the morning after Laura on August 27th. They worked with local law enforcement. They performed some search and rescue. They were ready to perform high water rescues, but that wasn't needed, even though they brought the swift water boats down there with them with a lot of their equipment. The rapid response team then searched the Lake Charles area for a location for long-term base camp, as they were invited to come and spend as much time down there as necessary. And then they ended up establishing our base camp in Moss Bluff, Louisiana, which is kind of a northern suburb of Lake Charles, just north of Interstate 10. And they immediately began performing debris and tree cleanup. Here was landfall on radar of Hurricane Laura. Laura officially made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 150 miles per hour. A real beast. Like I said, our guys, when landfall was going on, they were in the east side of Houston. Here's a picture of the velocity at landfall, somewhere near or just southeast of Cameron, Louisiana. The inbound and outbound winds at this time, 156 miles per hour on the velocity here. Pretty impressive for sure. Hurricane Laura, before it came on shore, you can see that at one time it had a velocity image on the Lake Charles radar of 182 miles an hour. And my little grandson just came in to say hello, and he's going bye-bye. Anyway, 182 miles an hour, I don't know if I buy that or not. I don't know if we ever got any kind of verification from Dropson from the hurricane hunters or from anywhere else that the winds were anywhere that strong. But nevertheless, I thought I'd throw that slide in there. I thought it was kind of neat, 182 miles an hour, question mark. That was the Lake Charles radar after the storm moved through. I'm sure many of you have probably seen that picture before from August 27th. It's miraculous that radar is already up, turning and burning again. and they already got it fixed, and it's all ready for this severe weather season. But that radar was a casualty for sure of Hurricane Laura. I arrived down for Hurricane Laura, I think it was about 8 days after landfall, or 9 days, something like that. One of the most impressive structures in Lake Charles was an all-glass building. This actually is a picture a couple of days later where they already started boarding up all the windows with plywood. But I wish you could have seen it when I first saw it, when it absolutely had, nothing but black spots throughout this entire building of glass structures. I know Tim Marshall was down there during site surveys right after Laura and has much more impressive pictures than this one of this particular building. Nevertheless, it was about Labor Day weekend, and I got down there with a Minuteman crew to help do whatever we needed to do for that particular weekend. Here's one of the, I believe this is a church that was really badly damaged in near downtown Lake Charles as well. The destruction, I mean, folks, I can show you picture after picture of what this looks like, and you can say, yeah, I've seen these before. It happens with every hurricane, happens with tornadoes and all that, and you kind of get numb to it. But this was the first time that I actually was on this side of seeing the damage, where it was live and in person, as opposed to being in the weather office where other people went out and did surveys or something like that. It really was eye-opening and kind of me taking a thing off my bucket list where I actually got to be retired, leave the weather service, and actually see the damage that these storms cause. Minuteman giving me the perfect opportunity to go and do that. On the left, you can see a blown-out McDonald's sign. This was up near Moss Bluff. I think that was supposed to be a Wendy's sign that got blown out to the right. I thought the funny thing about this picture on the right is that cheap tree work, and there's a number that you could call. Good luck trying to get cell phone coverage down there at this particular time, though. We did manage to get cell and internet up at our base camp relatively fast, though, but not everybody did. Another thing that was extremely impressive is I was driving up north of Moss Bluff. There's one tower that's standing, but there's equal towers similar to this one that are just totally flattened down here out in the distance that are laying on the ground. And I was told that these towers are made to withstand well over 100-mile-per-hour winds, and these down here in the distance were just absolutely flattened. And you can see the power lines just going down into the ground. Really a sight to see, not in a good way, but it's something that is just incredible to experience. Now I want to show you a little bit about what Minuteman's base camp looked like down in Lake Charles area. Now, we were located at the First Baptist Church in Moss Bluff, Louisiana. The picture you're seeing right there is our Mobile Incident Command Center. This is kind of like where we do all of our work. We keep track of where we're going to which homes and addresses we're going to go and help clean up. We have satellite TV in there. We have internet in there, amateur radios. We have a tall tower we send up so that we can get a pretty good reach on amateur radio range from there. This has complete ability. Of course, it has got its own diesel generator for our own electric power, so it can run for days and days. All we have to do is keep putting diesel fuel in it, fully air-conditioned, and so forth. There's even 2 bunkhouses on either end for whoever the incident command person is for that week at base camp. That's where they would sleep and so forth. Has complete electricity, though. It's just incredible. The thing that I found interesting is that we brought down 2 huge tanks of diesel fuel, but the gas stations came up fairly quickly that had some diesel fuel not too far from our base camp. And so as long as they had electric power, we were able to keep filling up our tanks and had diesel fuel readily available. But we were ready, if we had to, every day to drive up to 60 miles away back to Beaumont or someplace that had power to load up on the diesel fuel and continue to bring it back for our diesel burning generators and all of our equipment at the base camp. This is our shower and restroom facility at our base camp. Like I said, it was probably the most popular part of Minuteman's base camp. Hot showers for people in the community and our volunteers. We initially had a problem finding a place to dump the waste. There was a company that came the first couple of days and would empty out the waste out of this unit, and they had a place to go, and then we called them and said we need to do another dump, and he says, my place where I dump the sewage is full, and I don't have any place to do it. So literally what we did is we hauled this off for about an hour, went out to a Love's truck stop way out on the outskirts of town, and did a dump there just like any other camper would. And luckily the sprinkler system at the First Baptist Church continued to be on, so we were able to feed water into the shower and restroom unit through a hose through their water system. So we never really had any problem getting water, which was amazing. But we did have some problems at first getting a waste dump. This is a look at our relief trailer. This has all our equipment in it, our chainsaws, food items, all sorts of bottled drinks fully stocked, everything that we needed for weeks on end to have munchies, cold drinks, and so forth available, as well as all of the chainsaws, anything else that we possibly needed to be able to help clean up debris, as well as saw up trees and so forth. And lastly, this is outside of our sleep trailer. The sleep trailer has room inside for at least 30 residents to sleep inside a bunkhouse. And outside is our kitchen. And since we have full electric being generated from the diesel generators, we have a refrigerator, an ice machine, a freezer, a microwave oven, even a coffee maker. On the wall there, you see we have a big screen TV for briefings. We watch the Weather Channel and any programs we get on our satellite dish, because this sleep trailer has got a satellite dish on top of it where we can pull it up and watch television. It's not exactly roughing it. I mean, you work really hard when you're on the relief team and you're out there cleaning up, but all 3 meals are provided to Minuteman volunteers while you're on deployment, and you sleep in air-conditioned comfort with electricity. And the thing that really almost makes you feel guilty is that we were probably the only thing that had light down there. We were in the middle of a residential area that was totally in the dark, even 2 weeks or more after Hurricane Laura had moved through. They just had no air conditioning. It was dew point 72 degrees constantly, highs in the 90s. It was as uncomfortable as you possibly can get, and we were sleeping in air-conditioned comfort. It almost really made you feel a little bit guilty. But when the Minuteman, they designed this, they said they wanted to be totally self-sufficient, and they really have become that. Between the refrigerators, the freezers, the ice machine, everything that they bring, we actually ate pretty well while we were there. This was across the street from our base camp. This was a city park. And as you can see, there were residents that literally set up tents in the park because their homes were so badly damaged they couldn't live in them. No electricity, no air conditioning, and trust me, it was hot and humid at that particular moment. These folks very sheepishly came over and asked if they could use our restroom and shower facility, and they hadn't had a shower, some of them, since Hurricane Laura had hit, and we're talking like 8-9 days after I moved through and the storm moved through. So it really was something to talk and listen to these people tell their stories. You also can see the sheet metal laying there in the foreground. Lots and lots of sheet metal laying around that area. This was behind our base camp, another part of the church. the thing that absolutely amazed me is you hear now and again of certain organizations that will come where there's been a disaster and they'll help out. Folks, you have got no idea how many people came down to help Lake Charles after this disaster hit. There were Baptist relief organizations from about 6 different states that I counted, including Florida. And the Texas Baptist men were down there. Oklahoma, had a lot of people. Lots of retired people just wanting to help out. Samaritan's Purse was there, an organization called Mercy Chef, which cooks 2 hot meals a day for the community and also cooked them for us as well. We took advantage of them. They had huge mobile kitchen facilities. They were passing out food and all sorts of, snacks and things like that. All the community people had to do is drive up to the front of the First Baptist Church there in Moss Bluff and just get fed. And they were feeding hundreds of people every day. Samaritan's Purse was there. They were very prevalent. The thing that really surprised me, and I went all over Lake Charles and all over Moss Bluff, I did not see the American Red Cross but maybe one vehicle. Compared to the others, they were almost not there. Now, that doesn't mean they weren't. It's just I didn't see them compared to all of these other organizations, because there were tons of people from other organizations. And you talk about prepared, the Oklahoma Baptist people even brought in washers and dryers and their own water, big tanks of water, so that they could wash people's clothes. Because believe me, after working out in the field in that heat and humidity all day long, you get really hot and sweaty. And all night long, they were running to washers and dryers and doing people's clothes so that they had fresh clothes to go the next morning. It was absolutely amazing and heartwarming to see. It really renewed my hope in humanity, if you will, to see this number of people coming and helping out those that were really in an unfortunate way. And Minuteman was right there. We had kind of an agreement that if the Oklahoma Baptists would feed us some food every once in a while, they could come over and use our showers. And it seemed like a pretty good trade-off. Just again to give you a little bit of an idea, one of my jobs that I had to do is that if someone would notify us that they needed cleanup, I would go out with one other gentleman and take a look at their property, see how many trees were down, how badly was their property damaged. And of course, then we would listen to the stories of the people. A lot of them did evacuate, and were just getting back to their homes, or had just been back a couple of days. A couple of them stayed, and they told us their story of what it was like to live through Laura, staying in their homes, but there weren't very many of those. Many of them, when I told them that I just retired from the National Weather Service, you would not believe the good things they had to say about the National Weather Service. I mean, and this is not their first song and dance in the hurricane business. The Lake Charles office down there and the Hurricane Center has got a marvelous reputation down in that neck of the woods. And when they found out I was with the Weather Service, thank you so much for all that you've done. You helped us, Another thing I heard, too, a lot is that the people thought that if they would just evacuate Lake Charles and go to Alexandria, Louisiana, or Shreveport, or Monroe, that they would be out of it. And they said it was just as bad wind-wise and maybe not quite as much damage, but it was just as bad up there with Laura moving northeastward as it was in Lake Charles. They said we didn't go far enough, or else we should have gone west. We thought about going to Texas, or thought about going to New Orleans or someplace like that, or Mississippi even, but we went north, and it wasn't that good. Very interesting to hear all of their stories. Some of them have really tear your heart out, but it was really, really a good thing to be able to sit and listen to them and just talk to them and say, hey, we can help you out. One homeowner said that the cheapest bid they had to clean up their tree damage from their yard was $7,800. Minuteman did it for him for free. and it took us maybe 6 hours. They so much wanted to put money in our pocket. We said, no, here's what you do. If you got a cell phone, smartphone, go on their website and make a monetary contribution, a donation, and that way you can get a tax write-off for it. And that way, that's what we want you to, if you want to give us some money, that's fine, but that's where we want you to do it, because then you get the tax benefit for it. We don't want your money. We're all set, okay? But this is one house that we saw where it was one of those where companies were cleaning up yards across the street from $7,800 on up to help clean it up, which we were doing for free. We saw a lot of this in Lake Charles. This was electrical crews everywhere, getting rid of old poles if any of them were still standing and putting in new poles. One guy would put in a new pole, another one would follow with the structure on the pole, and the third one would come and start stringing lines. And it was amazing how many different states we saw power pole workers from, and they were all over the place. Some of them would stop and use our shower and restroom facility as well, because they didn't have any place else to go or stop. And they were telling us, you know, as the weekend went on and as the next deployment went on, what kind of progress they were making. And they said, hey, we're ahead of schedule. We may get everybody up with power within 6 weeks. And that was a much shorter time span than what we first heard. But that's a very common sight to see them. On the left was one of the other houses we were trying to help out. Some parts of Moss Bluff, there was a lot of pre-manufactured housing, and you saw sheet metal laying around everywhere. You could see in the center picture that it was not uncommon to see trees snapped off halfway up, especially the pine trees, lots of pine trees there. And, of course, you saw lots of trees that were just pulled up from the roots, and you just had a ball of dirt at the bottom there. So anyway, this is the first time I'd ever seen anything like this or experienced anything like it, and I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity through Minuteman Disaster Response Group to be able to do something like that. So with that, I think even this guy says that you should be in love with the Minuteman Disaster Response Group. Anyway, membership is open to anyone. I'm not here to give you a hard sell on becoming a member, but I did want you to know that initial dues yearly are $35 for being on the relief team. If you're interested, consider joining our team to help Minutemen save and rebuild the lives of those affected by natural disasters. Our volunteers are trained in all areas of disaster relief, including debris cleanup, resource management, search and rescue, first aid, emergency communications, and command structure. So we try to be there before, during, and after disaster strike to serve communities that need our help the most. And for more information, there is the Minuteman website. It was also on the email that hopefully you got that Dave McAnally sent out earlier today, talking about what my talk tonight was going to be about. So with that, I will ask Dave or Greg to unmute everybody and see if there's any questions.
David, I'll let you handle that if you don't mind, please, sir.
Everybody needs to unmute themselves if they have a question. They don't give us permission to unmute people's microphones.
I'll go ahead and ask if anybody does have any questions. As Greg or David said, just unmute and have at it. Well, Greg, you talked about Ms. Wise as being part of your organization. Did you have anything you'd like to contribute, ma'am?
Hi, this is Linda Wise, and I just think Greg is awesome to work with, and you did a great job tonight, Greg.
Thank you, ma'am.
Well, Linda, I appreciate you saying that. This is a pretty good group of people, the North Texas chapter of the AMS and NWA. It's a group of both meteorologists and non-meteorologists alike that share a common interest in weather, and it's open to anybody who lives in North Texas. I know that if the day ever came that meetings started being face-to-face, they're held at the National Weather Service office in Fort Worth, but that might be a bit of a drive for you because I know you live up on Richardson, but anyway, as long as the meetings are virtual like this, you certainly are free to participate.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions? I know I saw Abby at Kroger earlier today, and she said, tell me what you think is going to happen Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I will say this. I looked at the 18Z GFS model, and it is a lot faster with events this weekend than the earlier runs, and I don't put a lot of stock in the 18Z or the 6Z runs of the models because they don't have the latest Ravensson data in there. But nevertheless, it does look like Saturday is going to be a pretty interesting day, Saturday and Saturday night across north central and northeast Texas. Whether it's tornadic or not, it's too soon to tell, I think, but definitely looks like there's going to be a good dry push of air coming in behind the cold front. So there's probably going to be a triple point somewhere, whether it's on the Oklahoma side or our side of the Red River, kind of remains to be seen. And up to Friday, it looks like there's a real good warm front that's going to be developing across Oklahoma, so they could get quite a bit of rain up there to go along with the potential of severe weather wherever the triple point is up there and on Friday. But that will be working its way further south into north central and northeast Texas Saturday, and then eventually sweeping off into Louisiana by Sunday afternoon or Sunday night. Looks interesting. It's March.
Well, thanks for that, Greg. And this is Abby, by the way. It was good to see you. Anyway, do you think that Minuteman will go to all lower 48 or just to that two regions?
It is such a small organization now, it would be hard to see it going to all 48 states, at least in the near term. I know that the board of directors does have a master plan. I'm not privy to everything that they're thinking, but right now they want to focus in on the primary tornado and hurricane prone areas. So that would be everything from New Mexico to Florida. Our longest two deployments in terms of maintaining a base camp have been for hurricanes. We were down in Refugio, Texas for Hurricane Harvey. That was our longest deployment of 48 days, and we were in Moss Bluff and Lake Charles for about 32, if I'm not mistaken. We actually went back for the second tropical storm and hurricane they had down there, where the landfall was so close to the first one, but the winds weren't quite as bad. So we actually worked both of the storms, but I focused on Laura because that's the two that I went to, the two deployments for that one storm. Any other questions?
Tim?
Hello.
Yeah. I want to thank you and Minuteman for doing all this. It's tremendous to see these groups down there. I've been in Lake Charles off and on for many weeks, looking at the damage survey for mostly insurance companies. And the cleanup that you guys do is cannot be really said enough about it. It's phenomenal that what you can do, and I really appreciate that, and I know those people really appreciate it.
They really do. One thing I will mention is that the actual number of people who went on the deployment this year, even though we deployed after the tornadoes had occurred in West Monroe, Louisiana, we deployed to Onalaska, but for the tornadoes that hit down near Lake Livingston. We did, of course, the hurricanes down in southwest Louisiana. But the number of people actually went out was small because of the coronavirus issues. We did maintain social distancing and mask wearing as much as possible, but still that affected the number of volunteers that actually felt comfortable in coming out and helping out that we normally would see. And so that's why there's strength in numbers. We always could use even more people to help us out because not everyone is going to be available for every deployment that an organization like Minuteman has. Normally we get tens of people to come out to a deployment, but at some point in Lake Charles we were down to like 8 to 10 people per day. I will share you a story of how dedicated some of our volunteers are. Some of you may recall that there was a hydrologist that we had at West Gulf RSC who retired just 1 month before I did, Dr. Michael Schultz. His wife, Janine, also recently retired from Abbott Laboratories over in Irving as a chemist. They moved and built a house up in the mountains of southwest Colorado. But both of them were active in Minuteman before they left Texas and built their house up in Colorado. Janine flew from Denver. She drove across the mountains, went to the Denver airport, flew from Denver to Houston, rented a car, and helped work with the Minuteman crews in Lake Charles for at least 3 days. And she did that all at her own expense to help out because she has such a burden for the people when they are involved in these natural disasters. And then, you know, after her 3 full days of helping to clear debris and stuff like that, she, you know, reversed the trip, you know, turned it around a car at Houston and flew back to Denver and went back to their home. There is some cost that's involved, both time and money for Minuteman members. But when you consider what it is that you're doing for these communities, you know, it's well worth the cost. And you can write it off as a volunteer. You can write it off on your taxes if you keep your receipts and keep track of how much time and effort you actually put into it. But it's really cool to see what some people in Minuteman will do to help their fellow man. It really is pretty neat. Any other questions or comments?
Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
This is Dave McAnally. As far as the membership out in the other states, is the group looking to form sub-teams in other states to have a closer response, or are they just looking for more membership?
Well, they're forming a team right now, as I said, up in Tulsa. We've got 8 members in Tulsa right now, and we have a county coordinator for the Tulsa area. So as we do deployments, and one of the deployments we did was for a flood that was up on the Arkansas River going through there a couple of years ago, 2 years ago or so. And that's how Tulsa started getting involved. It's as we go to these different communities and people learn about Minuteman that they say, yeah, I'd like to be a part of your organization and I'd like to join, but I'm down here, I live in Moss Bluff, Louisiana, what can I do? Hey, you join, the next time we're nearby, you come on over. And so we have a operations director and a membership volunteer directors and stuff like that to help try to keep track of all of the volunteers and see who's available to come on over if there's a disaster that's close to where they live. So I would say it's open to anybody in those states. It's just that it's up to you to get to wherever you need to be in order for us to use you on a deployment. Now, my experience, we haven't gone west yet. I haven't been in it that long, of course, but most of our deployments have been like to Canton, Texas. I mentioned on Alaska. We went up to DeKalb, Texas after a tornado up there, Tulsa. So, I mean, it seems like everything's been east of Interstate 35 so far. That, of course, could change this year. So, Dave, I don't know exactly where in Oklahoma you're at, but if you're interested, we'll get you the information, or you can look it up online.
Thanks, Greg.
Well, if nobody has any other questions, we need to hold just a real quick, short business meeting, so we say we did it. Is there any other questions anybody has for Greg? Well, Greg, once again, thank you so much for putting this together. Very informative, and I'm glad you found something to keep you busy. As you said, when folks retire, we stay retired about a month, and then next thing you know, we find something else to keep ourselves busy. I'm unaware of any new business. Does anybody have anything that needs to be brought up? Hearing none. I know we have no old business at the moment. Go ahead, David.
Hey, Greg.
Yes, sir.
Just one thing. I recorded this. It's not the first one, but we haven't been publishing the recordings. I'm thinking this one may be worth publishing to the members as far as other members viewing it. And I'll clean, we'll pass it amongst the leadership first, but if there's no objections, I might post a link to the recording after we clean it up for beginning and end and that sort of stuff. But
Stanley, do you have an objection to that? Okay.
Oops, Stanley, you're muted.
No, he said no. I can read lips. I'm sure Amanda would be receptive too, but yeah, we'll talk to her first too. Well, Greg, as Stanley said earlier, if you would please get him your mailing address so he can send you our customary gift card, and hopefully you can use it to further your retirement in some shape, form, or fashion. If nobody else has any other questions or comments, I would take a motion to adjourn. All right, thank you, Stanley. Is there a second? Tom seconds. That worked. Thank you very much. Next month we have Kim Mokwako, and I probably mispronounced the lady's name. She is from the Sims unit up in Norman, Oklahoma. She is a social media person with the Weather Service, and she is a well-known speaker, and Amanda has managed to get her. We'll be meeting our next meeting at 8 p.m. instead of our customary 7, because Amanda has, Kim has a new young one, and she asked for some time to get the little one settled into bed before she did our Zoom meeting. So if y'all would spread the word, David will be getting out an email as customary and let you know all the particulars, and we'll have her bio and stuff ready to go. So appreciate y'all all being here tonight. Everybody go home safe and have a good week. Thank y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Greg.
Night, Stanley.
Night, Stanley.